Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about securing websites in the early web and telling you a few funny stories about people having their days profoundly ruined. Before I start, I'm Katie_Fenn on Twitter. Please tell me what you think about your talk. Speakers love getting feedback from people. And just in case moving images or videos on big screens makes you feel sick or uncomfortable, content warning will be on the bottom right-hand corner of my slides. So hi, I'm Katie. I work for NPM. Come and see me later on if you want a sticker. I've got lots of Wombat stickers. Please come and say hello. And I just wanted to shout out something I'm really passionate about. I love volunteering at Scotland JS. If you fancy coming to a conference that is there and you can walk up a mountain during your lunch break and have a walk in a national park, that is exactly where our venue is. It's really beautiful. You should totally come along and get yourself a ticket. Anyway, I came to the web, like a lot of people, through fandom. If you were here and you watched Rachel White's talk, Keeping the Internet Weird, last year, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So fans meet other fans through forums, through web forums, where you can log in and just stay up until the early hours of the web, just discussing your favorite characters. And post signatures used to be a very common sight. You used to use them to share your fandom and show off your skills. They're a way of creatively expressing yourself, and for many, they were an introduction into web design and development. This is how I learned HTML. You could add them to your posts by writing HTML. It was also my first introduction to messing with other people's sites. And you could do things like HTML bombs. HTML bombs is where you deliberately or accidentally... Okay. Technical edge, folks. Is that good? Excellent. Okay. Round of applause for the tech support people. So you could mismatch HTML and create HTML bombs. And this was accidental at first, but lots of people used it deliberately and maliciously to insert mismatch HTML to make content disappear off the side of the screens or make it completely unreadable altogether. This is caused by writing code that trusts any old crap that the user sends you, which is otherwise known as bad input validation. There was another forum around about this time dedicated to the Animal Crossing games. And Animal Crossing, if you've not played it before, is an idyllic game filled with a town of peaceful people just getting along and trading. It's a really lovely, idyllic game. But this forum had a page that allowed you to edit your profile, change your username, change your password. And someone discovered that there is a hidden input field that contained the user ID of the person's profile that you're editing. So someone thought, what happens if I change that ID to the owner of that forum, make it user ID 1, and change the password? Well, they found out that they could edit the profile of any user on this forum. Needless to say, this website devolved into utter anarchy for a few days until it was fixed. There aren't any rules of making web development, but if there were, I'd make this one the first rule. Never trust user input. Never, ever trust user input. Always ask yourself how even the nicest people playing the nicest game in the universe can misuse your code for fun and profit, because they will. So how can you help protect yourself against bad input validation? Well, you can use a library like Joy to validate your data on the back end to make sure that the data is exactly what it appears to be, make sure it's the right type and the right length. You can check a user's actions against their identity as well, to check what actions that they can take and whose data they can take it on. For instance, it shouldn't be possible for a newly registered user to change the profile of the owner of the forum, as we just saw. And never, ever rely on client-side validation alone. It is a convenience to the user and absolutely nothing else. It's not a security measure. For my next story, many forums on the early web allowed you to log in using a login form just like this. So you could enter your username and your password, and it would save you from having to enter these every time you wanted to make a new post. Many of these forums are vulnerable to an attack. Using this one neat password, you could log in as any user that you chose. This attack allows users to run their own database queries on your site, which is otherwise known as SQL Injection. When you fill out a username and a password in a login form like this, the credentials submitted in these forms get filled into an SQL query that you can see on the right. SQL is a popular language for querying databases, and this example checks users matching a username and a password. If the database finds matching users, it grants the user permission to log in. Let's see what happens to the query if you submit that one weird password. The database has interpreted it as regular SQL, which has a consequence that we didn't expect. This part of the query says, give me all the users with the username, matching the username admin, and the password or 1 equals 1. This is like saying to the database, this makes the query match every single user in the database, but the software is checking for more than 0 matches, so it grants the user permissions to log in. This is essentially saying to the database, give me all the users matching the username admin, or whatever you got, I guess. I'm not fussy. SQL Injection hands the keys of the database to your users. It allows attackers extraordinary access to your website to recover sensitive information of your users and to give themselves complete control to your site. One of the most famous examples of SQL injection was Drupalgeddon. It affected every single Drupal 7 website underneath that version number. And if you think about how many sites use Drupal, that is a lot of sites. It allowed remote code execution, which allows the attacker full control over the website. There's also some evidence to suggest that attackers patched the original exploit after breaching sites to make it appear as if those sites had not been breached. So how can you help protect yourself against SQL injection? Don't use string concatenation to build queries. Get some help from things like tools that offer you parameterized queries, such as PDO and Connects. Or you can use object relational mapping to get expert help from experienced tool maintainers who've done this before. I wanted to tell a quick bonus story that has nothing to do with the web. It relates to a game that I used to play called World of Warcraft. In World of Warcraft, you can take on big bosses, big monsters. And once someone found that by shooting a fireball and running away, and shooting a fireball and running away, they could tow a boss across the continent to the capital city of Stormwind. So they managed to get this boss called Lord Kazakh into Stormwind. And Lord Kazakh, when he kills a character, he heals himself, and his maximum HP increases. Within a few hours of being in Stormwind, Lord Kazakh was fundamentally immortal. And Blizzard, the makers of the game, had to roll the servers back in order to restore people's accounts. This is a really good example of how you may not need to breach a computer system in order to wreak havoc. Another story about my time on Final Fantasy forums was when I was browsing the site. I was just looking at conversations about whether certain characters were resurrectable. And suddenly, I was logged out. I was presented with the login screen, and I just thought, what's going on? And this wasn't just happening to me. This was happening to other people as well. So I wonder what was causing this. We eventually tracked it down to one user with a broken avatar. We thought, what's going on? Well, it turns out that they'd set the avatar to logout.php so that any user who's looking at this site would be logged out. This is an attack that gets other users to do your dirty work for you, which is otherwise known as Crosssite request forgery, or CSRF for short. Crosssite request forgery was successfully exploited on the Netflix website, and this isn't the Netflix that we have today. This is the old Netflix that used to post you DVDs in order to watch at home. This attack was possible without even injecting any content into the Netflix website. In fact, you could host this attack on your site and just convince people to go to that site. And we know that's possible because how many times has this happened to you? So what if you could convince people to go to your website? And what if those people were logged into Netflix? In 2006, Dave Ferguson discovered a cross-site request forgery in Netflix, a vulnerability in Netflix, to put an image with that URL. That URL adds a film of his choice to this user's queue, sprinkle in a few requests to change the account name and to change the shipping address, and you could ship yourself free DVDs courtesy of whoever looked at your website. Cross-site request forgery exploits the trust placed in users' browsers. Why shouldn't Netflix trust these requests? They come from legitimate users. The users have the right cookies and they logged in themselves. The problem stems from trusting user sessions and trusting cookies on their own. So how can you help protect yourself against cross-site request forgery? You can verify the origin and the referrer headers of HTTP requests to confirm they actually come from your website. These can't be set programmatically in browsers by JavaScript. These can be faked using other methods, so they're not always a surefire way of protecting against every single attack. You can also use synchronizer tokens or CSRF tokens to verify requests have actually come from a real form on your website. These tokens are long, unpredictable, unique data that's generated on your server and placed into web forms for submission with form data. Your server then only accepts a request from a user if it includes a recent token that's been generated for that user. These tokens aren't stored in cookies, they're stored in the markup of your website, so they can't be sent in a CSRF attack. You can also use cookie-to-header tokens, which are very similar. This relies on JavaScript's same origin protocol that means that JavaScript can only set HTTP headers for sites that's hosted on the same origin. Finally, this is absolutely no defense if your site has been compromised in any other way, for example, using cross-site scripting, which we're going to get onto next. How mad would you be if I changed the slide now? Let's talk about BB code. BB code was a special language that allowed you to format text on forums and in your posts. You could use it to insert images or GIFs of your favorite character. It was intended to be a replacement for HTML and a subset, a smaller, reduced language, because validating HTML is a hard job. So having a reduced language would make it easier to validate. You could use it to insert your favorite GIFs to your heart's content, and this was our idea of fun back on the early web. One day, one of my friends found that mismatching the opening and closing tags, BB code tags, allowed you to do some weird stuff. Mismatching tags confused the BB code transcoder and caused broken HTML to be inserted into that page. From there, they were able to insert arbitrary code into their posts and start executing JavaScript. They used this to repeatedly spam the forum of a rival online game clan during a match. And with their opponents distracted, they won the match, while their forums were slowly filling up with gobbledygook. This attack allows someone to run their code on your website, which is otherwise known as cross-site scripting. This is Sami Kamkar. In 2005, he became famous for having friends. Lots and lots and lots of friends. He wrote a worm, which is a self-replicating script that replicates itself across the website. Like lots of people in 2005, Sami had a MySpace page, and MySpace was a limited social network by today's standards. You could customize your headline, but you couldn't really put much in there. It was very restricted. It had limited formatting options, and it allowed you to put 12 profile photos on your page, but only 12. If you wanted to add more photos, you had to take some down. So Sami discovered that some tags, like the div tag and the image tag, were allowed to be inserted into content, but the script tag to insert JavaScript was filtered. MySpace wasn't about to let people insert scripts and run JavaScript on their pages. MySpace stripped the script tag. Okay, sounds back. But some browsers executed JavaScript in style tags. It's like the browsers said, here's a div tag. Do you want to set a background? Yeah, sure. What URL do you want to set? I'll have JavaScript, please. Yeah, sure. I'll execute that. So MySpace stripped the word JavaScript, thwarting injection of scripts into MySpace pages. It turns out, though, that if you inserted a line break into the words JavaScript, the code would run absolutely fine, and MySpace would not know. That's how Sami got JavaScript into MySpace. Now he tried to write a script that would replicate itself across all the pages. So you could find out new friends by inspecting the page's source. So you could find the user IDs of the people that you wanted to add. To do this, normally you would use the body.innerHTML property. MySpace filtered this too. They were prepared for people like Sami coming. This isn't a problem if you concatenate a string and evaluate it using the eval function. There's a very good word by there's a really good reason why a lot of developers call eval evil. This trick also works on XML HTTP request on ready state change, otherwise known as AJAX, and this allowed Sami to make HTTP requests to the MySpace API, so we could send friend requests. Sami also found that MySpace's API worked on a different subdomain. The same origin protocol in browsers forbidded him from sending requests from the profile pages domain, but he discovered that you could actually view profile pages on the API's domain, so he just redirected the browser to the other domain, and it worked fine. This is the complete code. There's a few more tricks that Sami used, but I've shown you the most interesting ones. He added this to his profile page, and he waited. 1 hour later, he had a new friend request starting to work. 7 hours later, he had 221 friend requests, and it's starting to take off. 1 hour later, that number has doubled to 480. It's starting to grow exponentially. Every friend that he recruits, that also recruits all of their friends as well. And the total friend count grows and grows and grows. 8 hours later, Sami has 900,000 friend requests. It's now growing so fast that every time Sami refreshes the page, thousands more people are being added to that count. This is Sami's actual screenshot showing the number of friend requests. 1 hour later, MySpace collapses under the load of people requesting to be Sami's friend. MySpace eventually recovered and patched the vulnerability 2 hours later. Sammy was raided by the US Secret Service. He was sentenced to 90 days community service. He was only allowed the use of one computer and not allowed to use the internet. And he was ordered to pay over $15,000 restitution to MySpace. Crosssite scripting allows users to inject their own code into your site, and some people believe content injection is a better word for this, because it's people stuffing their own HTML, their own CSS, their own images into your site, and it's very dangerous. So how can you help protect yourself from cross-site scripting? You can escape user input on entry using a library like Sanitize HTML. Don't be tempted to roll your own. MySpace were prepared for people like Sammy, and they weren't prepared enough. This is really, really difficult to do. Use an auto-escaping library such as React or Angular or a templating library. They won't save you on their own, and there are ways around them, but they can be updated frequently, and they are very convenient to use. You can implement a content security policy. This restricts which domains content can be securely loaded from. Loading content from third parties is very, very risky, so you want to lock it down to domains that you absolutely trust. You can also use the integrity property on script and link tags. This allows you to insert a hash into these tags, and this hash is like a fingerprint for the resources that you're loading. If the resource changes, if it's being changed by someone else, and the man in the middle of the tag, that fingerprint will also change as well. So if the fingerprint doesn't match the resource, then the browsers can refuse to load it. In 1999, the web was like a Wild West frontier. These newly discovered attacks could be used against pretty much all websites, and it was just utter chaos. This is the picture that we still conjure about web security and about the web. And the truth is that the stakes are higher than they've ever been now. This is not just discussing your favorite characters. We're now talking about personal data. We're talking about people's money and people's lives. But I also believe that there's never been a better time to learn about web security. More and more resources and tools are available to help you write secure code. And try not to think of it like a Wild West, but think about it as an adventure playground. If you're curious, learning about web security can be really fun and really, really interesting, and it need not be really hard. It's an important topic, but I'm really confident that there really has never been a better time to learn. Everyone has to start, and everyone is a beginner once. So I want to shout out all these people who helped make this talk possible for telling me stories about the early web. Names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty. Thank you very much.